This video is sponsored by PlayStation. What is up everyone, it is me DevilNeverCry, and in today's video, I'm going to be taking you through my top beginner tips for Ghost of Yotei to help you get through those crucial beginning hours. Whether Ghost of Yotei is your first foray into the Ghost series, or perhaps you need a bit of a refresher, hopefully there's something here for everybody. With that said, let's dive in. Starting off in no particular order, my first tip is going to be to refrain from using the fast travel, at least for those initial few hours. The game world is packed with so many points of interest, bamboo to cut, duels to find, resources, weapons, and much more that you will likely miss out on if you don't take the time to travel through the map. Once you're more established in the things that you have and you want to sort of focus on being efficient, sure, but I would implore you to take the time to travel everywhere physically, whether that's on foot or most likely on horseback. My next tip ties somewhat into that first one, which is at any point during exploration, if you find a golden bird flittering amidst the sky, you kind of want to drop what it is that you're doing and just focus on following that bird. They will almost always lead you to a unique point of interest that will give Atsu some kind of permanent buff in the process, whether it's a major or minor charm for completing a reliquary riddle, or some spirit for completing a newly found bamboo strike. They're definitely worth pursuing whenever you see one. The world of Yotei can definitely be a dangerous place. Oftentimes you'll see people just running amidst the land, whether they're set up by the waterfront, they're lurking at a crossroads, or perhaps they've set up camp somewhere. But what I would say is, at any point if you see people, go ahead and get close to them and try and deduce whether they're friend or foe. I mean, typically the fact that they're gonna pull out their swords will tell you a lot, but if you don't go and talk to people, you'll miss out on information, talking to settlers about the Yotei 6, and more importantly, you might even miss out on some vendors. These vendors are going to be people that sell you armor, for example, either for yourself or for your horse, and they'll also sell you things like resources, ammo, and even dyes for some of your armor too. So I would say proceed with caution, but make sure you don't ignore people and just write them off as another combat encounter. Speaking of combat encounters, this might be a tip that you think is quite obvious, but whenever you do go ahead and strike down a bunch of Ronin enemies, Saito's men, whoever, make sure that when combat is done, you take the time to do a final lap of the battlefield and make sure that you loot corpses. This is important especially early on, as a lot of the enemies will drop metal that you'll need to go and upgrade Atsu's katana. Atsu's family homestead is chock full of memories, some better than others, but what I will say is that you should definitely take the time to frequently visit, at least in those first couple of hours, the homestead, as oftentimes you'll have new memories that resurface. For example, after initially clearing out all the memories that I found there initially and going off to play more of the game, whilst I came back to, again, upgrade my katana, I found memories that were dedicated towards painting, alongside the bamboo strikes, etc., which not only provide you with more insight into Atsu and her family, but will also net you some interesting resources as well. The beginning of Ghost of Yotei can be quite open-ended. You have several targets to choose from, and it's at your discretion with where you want to start. Personally, I would recommend that you make a beeline directly for Hanbei, the dual katana master. Not only do you get some insight into Atsu's background and the events that took place at her homestead, but you also get access to a brand new weapon, which is going to be mighty useful against some of those spear users you'll be encountering in the game soon enough. And whilst you're in this region of the map, close to Mount Yotei, I would highly recommend that you make your way up to the summit to find the shrine. Early on in the game, whilst you're revisiting some of Atsu's memories, you'll make note of the fact that both of Atsu's parents had once made a perilous journey up the mountain to a shrine, and if you decide to follow in their footsteps, you'll find yourself netting a couple of very useful charms, and if you look around in this area, you'll also find yourself a brand new katana. Well, not necessarily a brand new katana, but a brand new look for the one that you currently have, which I think personally is a big upgrade on the one that you start out with. The game is chock full of moments like these, like the shrine, with things that are mentioned but you're not directly guided towards. The aforementioned shrine on the top of Mount Yōtei being a good example of this. Anytime something is casually mentioned, it's always worth investigating. Beyond making sure that Atsu's tools are up to the job through upgrades, you also want to make sure that Atsu herself continues to develop. Now, Atsu does have a set of skill trees with a multitude of different techniques that fall into different categories, which will allow you to sort of pick how you want Atsu to develop. One of the earliest points I've found to be able to actually gain a point to be able to spend towards some of these skill trees happens to be this camp near the north of the Yotei grasslands, just below the Lake Jozan but above the Yotei River. I'll point it out here on the map. It is a fairly formidable camp, and probably at this point it's going to hold the most amount of enemies you've seen in a combat encounter, I'd imagine, but it definitely is worth the effort. In situations like this, when you're going to go ahead and tackle a camp, what I would say is that you should definitely make sure to use as much stealth as possible. The assassinations are basically a one-hit kill, which should mean that you're able to whittle down the numbers quite rapidly, provided you pick and choose your moments carefully. But ultimately, what I would say is don't be afraid if things go wrong. Instead of, trying to reload the checkpoint, what I would say is just dive straight in. Something that might make some of these combat encounters easier is that very early on, if you see enemies that you've defeated drop their weapons, or perhaps you'll find weapons just sitting on a weapons rack out in the open, if you're able to nail an enemy with a thrown weapon, it often is a one-hit kill, which should make things much easier. If you're still struggling to tackle combat encounters, or perhaps you're struggling when facing a duel, what I would suggest is you go ahead and make camp. During camp, you'll be able to cook up a meal through the resources that you've managed to find, and you'll often be given a temporary perk that can be quite powerful, including things like an increase in the damage that your katana does, or an increase in the amount of spirit that you have, or essentially a heal during combat, which should help even the odds in your favor just a bit more. And obviously tying into that, as I've just mentioned, resources, make sure that when you're running around, whether you're on foot or on horseback, that you actually are picking up resources. They are used for things more than just dyes for your armor, for example. In certain instances, they're used for things like cooking, which can give you an edge in battle. And so, for the sake of just making sure to press a button when you're running through an area, they're definitely worth it. At times during combat, or perhaps when you're just about to be dealt a finishing blow, a wolf will come to Atsu's aid. Now, alongside Atsu herself, this wolf can also be upgraded in its functionality. The first step in this process is keeping an eye out for any mentions of a wolf being spotted or heard. Very early on, actually right close to Atsu's homestead, you can find this point of interest here in which a wolf has been sighted. Going through and aiding the wolf and ultimately freeing some captured wolves will actually net you a point that you can again use in the wolf's skill tree to upgrade its functionality in combat. Considering just how close this is to Atsu's home and how easily you're able to access this very early on in the game, it's definitely worth going through the effort of it. If you've played the previous entry in the Ghost series, this last tip will sound rather familiar. And that is the fact that the smokestacks that you see on the horizon will typically mark out a point of interest that is worth checking out. The game does a wonderful job of being organic in how it pushes the player, particularly with things like the guiding wind, which will direct you towards your destination without an overt marker somewhere on the screen. And likewise, if you're just looking to roam the land without having to check your map, you can use these smokestacks as a bit of a waypoint to aim for if you're looking to stumble upon something interesting, so to speak. And with that, we come to the end of this video. Ghost of Yotei is now available on PlayStation 5. Check the link in the description to learn more. Those are some of my top tips for beginners when getting stuck into Ghost of Yotei. if you enjoy the video or find it helpful, do be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing for more Ghost of Yotei. Similarly, if there is a tip that you think should be in this video, let me know down in the comments below. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.